then I can answer you. Now, first of all, we were here in, I think we came in July, Ratri Yatra time. So we stopped in Aritra's home. Then casually we mentioned that why don't we organize a workshop because we're going to be there for Kaidan. He said he's very new, he will try. And you can see what is the result now. It became a big workshop. All credit goes to him. Other thing I want to say is the day I left Ottawa, which was Wednesday, I think a week ago, the temperature on the airport was -16, so I'm happy to be here. It's -16, okay? It's no square root business, as Jack was saying. I'm happy to be here. This is what I'm going to present is, this appeared in archive maybe a few months ago. And the reason I personally got interested in this particular work is because some of my colleagues were solving another problem, and this result basically wiped out their result. Okay, so we got pretty much excited with this result. Again, it is written by Timothy Chan, Sadil, Harpalet, and Mitchell Jones. I do not know much about Mitchell Jones. He's a PhD student. I do not know even whose. But the first two guys are very famous. And if you want to learn computation geometry, basically read Timothy Chan's paper. Okay, that's enough. You don't have to read anything else. So I have to use this gadget. So it appeared in Innovations in Theoretical Computer Science conference in January. This is co-located with SODA. So I will try to give sort of overview of their paper. Please stop me if something is not clear. I forgot to mention that I made basically my daytime, but your night time. So I haven't slept. I shouldn't sleep because it's midnight there in Ottawa right now. So there will be a lot of errors. We will spot it when we go. Okay. And these are not very pretty slides. Usually I try to make a little better slides. The one of the culprit for this thing is Aritra because he pre-warned my talk. So I had otherwise a whole day to prepare slides, okay? But I'm happy that I had to do less work. So it's all computation geometry, no quantum business, no probability right now. There is probability which is hidden, we are not going to mention at all. So what this particular result says is the following. So we are going to talk about points in D dimension. For the purpose of talk, points are in 2 dimensions and they are sitting in unit cube for the whole talk, okay? So what this particular paper says is that we can order the points in the unit cube in what are called linear orderings. I'm going to later refer to them as permutations. So that for any pair of points, you take P and Q, all the points which are between P and Q, so there is a linear ordering, so you take any pair P and Q, so there is a linear ordering such that all the points between P and Q are very close to P or Q. So if you think of P is a point in 2 dimension, Q is a point in 2 dimension, all these points in between P and Q are sitting in a small circle, epsilon times the distance between P minus Q, or between P and Q, they are there. So they are locally there. Is this statement clear?
So points are either close to P or to
Or
not hand.
Not hand, yeah. So everybody is clear what we're talking about? Yeah.
Do you mean to say that in this linear ordering up to a certain point everything is close to P and then?
No. So all the points between P and Q, they are either close to P or Q. Either or whatever, I do not know. So, okay. Any other questions about this thing?
So this neighboring do not have to be continuous, like half, the first half is close to P and then
Doesn't have to be, but it will turn out to be.
okay.
More questions on clarity?
Sorry, so, what if I map? So what is the linear ordering?
So these points are in 2 dimension.
Yes.
I am giving an order on the points. This is my first point, this is my second point. So that's my linear order. Okay, and I'm going to compute certain number of linear orders, which is specified there, whatever is that number, 1 over epsilon g, whatever.
These points were originally in 3 dimensions.
Right, yeah.
You map them to a 1-dimensional real line.
Right, yeah.
And
Then I take any pair of points P and Q. There is a linear order such that all the points between P and Q in the linear order, they are close to P or Q.
Yes, what if I map the entire real line to a single point or close enough to some single point, then every 2 points are close to each other?
That is true, but it's going to be useless.
So it will satisfy this definition.
It will satisfy this definition, but it's useless for the purpose of answering.
Sir, for any pair of points,
Does it really satisfy this definition? Because this definition says you must permute the given points.
Yeah.
The way I
And
see
all
it-
the points between P and Q are close to P and Q. If everybody's point to a single point,
That's
so permutation will be violated, he's
Yeah.
right. But geometrically you can put it there.
The slight epsilon I can always.
Yeah, so there are more questions on first slide, good. Yeah,
for any pair of points, same ordering or different ordering?
what's that?
For any pair of points,
Yeah,
same ordering or different ordering?
or different, there is one of the orderings. Okay. Let's continue. So,
Sorry, I have one. So everywhere is it?
yeah, so hopefully we will get to learn a few of these keywords there. Quadrilles, linear ordering of points in a quadrille, shifted quadrilles and approximately nearest neighbor and so on, so on. I especially want to come to the fifth and the sixth. If we can touch upon that, there is a beautiful construction which is what is helpful in this particular context. That will be useful. So we'll see where all we get to. I am going to be around till whatever last date, so please ask me questions on this or other things. Okay, so 2 dimensions. We're talking about a quad tree. All points are sitting in a unit cube. Okay, so the root of the quad tree is, that's the node which represents this unit square. In a quad tree, we partition the plane, this unit cube, into 4 equal parts. You draw the separating planes for x and y axis or whatever axes you have. So you get 4 nodes, 4 subcubes. That's what is represented there. Okay, and then you keep on going further. So each of those things you're going to partition further. So this is a nice partition of the plane, has been around for many decades, has beautiful properties and whatnot. One of the things which you do is, so you get the associated tree, which should be clear. It's giving you what regions will be around.
Points that appear in the unit square appear at the leaves alone, or they
Appear in the leaves for our purposes. There are variations where we can pad up the nodes with many things. Right now we can just think of the nodes as bifurcation lines where you are cutting and whatnot. Okay?
you draw that tree even if there are no points in that square.
You shouldn't, because there is no point going further if there is no point here. But for time being, let's continue with that. Okay, there are a lot of, I have a lot of cut corners, okay? And I know Giacomo, Nadi, these guys are not going to let me go. So, but please ask and raise doubts, yeah? So now there is this interesting thing, so maybe I can illustrate this on the slide here. So once you have a tree, you're going to do a traversal in the tree, depth first search, all of you know, we'll perform depth first search. But when we perform depth first search, we have to say in which order we visit the children of a node. The way we are going to do here is, we'll say, it doesn't matter which way we do, but here for time being, or this is very traditional in these things, is that you say I visit this child first, then this child, then that child, and then that child. So this is what is called as the Z order here, ulta Z, reverse Z. Okay? So this is so if we are thinking about depth first search, when we are at that node, recursively we are going to visit here. So we go this, that. So that is done. Then we go to this guy, this, that. This is done. Then we go there, and so on. Right? This traversal is clear. So this sort of gives me the linear order of these subcubes. First one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, seventh, eighth, and so on. Everybody's okay with that? Yeah. So now, if we have points in our 2 dimension, and then, oh, I forgot the separating line here, must be very late in the night. Okay. So now if you do the depth first search traversal of that particular tree, so in the depth first search we're going to first visit here, then there, then there, and then there. This is what I have listed here. Is everybody okay with that? Any questions?
Just reading the leaves from left to right.
Basically, yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's what depth first search will do. I have my what? Yes, all good?
The ordering of every child is basically that Z.
Right. So that's one way to specify order. You can specify any way you like, and later on we will have, you will see, we will specify in other ways. Okay, yeah. So if you pay attention here, you can't pay attention because even I can't read this, so forget it. Okay, so the good property about depth first search is it finishes everything in this node, then moves to that node. In that case, it will, let's say, finish this node, then finish everything here, and so on. So it has this thing about finishing things in a closed neighborhood. Yeah? So if you think about that, then these particular points, whatever are sitting here, will be in the first part here. Then all the points here will be in the second part, and so on. Right? That's the property about depth first search. So this is what I tried to show, that all the points in the first part are sitting here, all the points in the second part are sitting here, third part there, and fourth part there. This part is clear, everybody? And in particular, if you want to think about the points which are sitting here, are going to be here. Not in this part, but in this part, in the first part here. Right? So it has this local property. And that little subcube will correspond to a little subcube here, a little region there, and so on. Okay. So we are given endpoints in our unit cube, and let's say we are interested to know nearest neighbor of these points. That means, yeah.
So is the correction in the previous slide that you said, this is some part of the proof of the main, the challenge
Right,
that
yeah.
you're after.
Yeah.
Except that the family is not clear, but if you fix this ordering, you can get one linear ordering of it.
Right, and we are going to have many different orderings, we'll get many different linear orderings, etc., etc. You are far ahead, sir. Okay, so we'll come. But this is the idea about a linear order. Yeah. No more questions? Okay. So we are given points in the unit cube. We are interested to know which pair is sort of the closest. We really do not want to figure out which is actually the closest pair, but we are happy to be approximate closest. Let's not worry about what approximate means. It's 1 plus epsilon times the distance of the closest pair. So we can be a little informal here. And so we have stored all our points in the quad tree. So I didn't say what is the quad tree. This is what is called as the quad tree. This is the associated geometric structure of it. Okay. So a subcube in the quad tree is called a cell. So there is a cell which has both P and Q. Of course, the parent of this cell will have P and Q and so on. So let's say that there is a cell in the quad tree. So if I go to the previous slide. So let's say there is a cell in the quad tree. Okay, so let's say this cell. Yeah. So there is a cell in the quad tree. Let's say whose diameter, the longest distance, we can say the diagonal of this cell is about the same distance as the distance between P and Q. So we make this big assumption. Let's assume. Okay. So here is the associated linear order which we had computed using our Z order, depth first search and so on. So all the points in this particular cell are mapped here. Okay, there was the property which we had. So P is somewhere in this order and Q is somewhere in this order. So now think about the point which is next to P in this particular order. Okay, I call it It was I don't know. It was a symbol R or X. I forget now. X. So what do you think is the distance between P and X? It cannot be larger than the diameter of this cell. And the diameter of this particular cell is about the closest pair distance between P and Q. So this distance will be approximately the distance between the closest pair, between P and Q. Is this point clear? So P's neighbor is within the same distance as P's nearest neighbor. Is this point clear to everybody? Yeah. Here there was a big assumption that P and Q are sitting in a cell whose diameter is about same as the distance between these 2 points. Okay? So if that property is given, then this particular linear order is good enough to determine what is P's nearest neighbor. We can report X as the nearest neighbor of P, and we know that so the distance between P and X cannot be smaller than the distance between P and Q, because we are assuming Q is the nearest neighbor of P. So it will approximate. Everybody's okay with that part? So now Timothy Chan and there are a lot of other people before showed that, okay, if we go back to the quad tree here, there may be a point here and then a point here. They get separated by the very first plane in the quad tree, so we do not have that property that there is a cell in the quad tree which has this nice property about that the distance between P and Q is about the diameter of the cell. So what these guys showed is the following thing, which we do not have to worry too much about reading this thing. What they show is that we take our point set P and we are going to make shifted copies of this particular point set, and they're going to shift it by a particular vector. So if the dimension is D, in our case its dimension is 2. So we'll compute 3 point sets. P0 is the original point set, P1 and P2. And all these points are shifted a little bit. P0 is the original point set, P1 is point shifted a little bit to the northeast, and P2 are the points shifted a little bit more. Okay? What you do is you compute the quad trees for each of these guys. So those trees and subdivision of the plane and whatnot. And then one can show that for any pair of points P and Q, there exists a quad tree, in this case T0, T1 or T2, such that there is a cell in one of these quad trees whose, you see where P and Q are, in which cell they are in, and then there is a cell whose diameter is proportional to the distance between P and Q. Okay? So they prove this statement. So this has been known. There are many results on this thing. What Timothy was able to do is that he showed that this particular D is very close to the dimension of the point set. There were results which had D square, D log D, and things like this. Okay? So there is such a thing. Yeah? So in place of one quad tree, now we have order of dimension number of quad trees. And if dimension is constant, then we have constant number of quad trees. I have no clue when we started, when we are going to end. It's 12:15 for me. Okay. 11:10. 11:10. Okay.
Sir,
Yeah.
after shifting, we are again computing the quad trees?
Yeah. For each. So just treat them as different point sets, and you just construct.
The first stage, the P and Q may be a very small cell.
Yeah.
Then after the first shift or the final shift, it may be contain the whole plane. So the cell will be.
But what the statement is, in one of these quad trees,
Okay.
there is a cell.
Yeah, but it can be the whole plane also.
That's fine. It could be the whole thing, but that means P and Q are very far away. That's quite possible. Okay. So the approximate nearest neighbor algorithm by Timothy Chan. So there are few papers. This is not a result of a single paper. But I think this is an interesting paper in '98 in discrete and computation geometry, where he had a code of 2 pages to compute the approximate nearest neighbor. And this is actually an implementation paper from him. what it showed is that we can do this nearest neighbor computation pretty quickly. And the way he does it is in the following way. You construct linear order for each of the quadries, that's for search traversal. And for each point P, find its nearest neighbor in each of the linear orders that minimize the distance. So that means, let's go back. So for each point P, you track what is X, the next guy in the order. And among all the linear orders, you will have order of D linear orders. You find that X which is closest to P. So when you measure the distance, you measure P. Okay? Is that clear? So what he showed is that that's good enough. Okay, that can compute you the approximate nearest neighbor. But this is the approximation factor here is constant times. Okay, it's not 1 plus epsilon and so on. Then they did more work to make it 1 plus epsilon. Those are very cumbersome schemes. So now we are coming to the paper which I want to talk about. There they showed a pretty simple, elegant way of getting 1 plus epsilon nearest neighbor computation. Yeah. It was given there in the slide. These are the shifts exactly. Each point is shifted by these values exactly. Okay? It's a vector to the set. So if a point is here, you shift it that way. And so that's the first shift, the second shift is the reason. Okay? No, everybody's fine? Yeah. Okay. So let's come to the epsilon quadries. So in the standard quadry, in our language, epsilon is going to be half. That means, so if you take the big cube in the beginning, we divide it into 4 parts. Okay, and then each of those subparts we divide into 4 parts. But there is nothing so great about 4, you can divide it into many parts. So you can take your big cube and you can divide it equally into that many parts, subparts. Okay? So this is what is the parameter epsilon here which will be determined. So if epsilon is half, that's a standard quadry, but you are not restricted by epsilon to be half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in this case, you can take epsilon to be 1/8. Okay, or 2 to the power minus 3. Yeah. So that will give you a different division than what you have. It's the same thing. In place of having 4 cells, now I have many cells. That's it. Yeah. Good. So here is the standard quadry, which is done with.
Yes.
What's that?
The MPSD already defined here also.
Yeah, we'll come to that. 0.5 in the thing. Okay, we'll come to that. So here is the standard quadry. So the root node, the unit cube divided into 4 cells. Each of those 4 cells divided into 4 subcells, and each of those divided into 4 subcells. What we can see is that this particular quadry, the standard quadry, can be thought of as a union of 3. In this particular example, I'm taking epsilon to be 1/8, above minus 3. This can be thought of as a union of 3 epsilon quadries. 3 1/8 quadries. So you can take the lines representing the black things. I hope they came out right. So the root node, this one, and so on. So every third level gives you 1 epsilon tree. And every third level is taking the first one, gives you the blue quadry and the red epsilon quadry. Is that clear to everybody? Yeah. So standard quadry has that many number of epsilon quadries. Good. Well, so far the slides came out nice. Okay, now the panic starts. This is where you start feeling sleepy. Then I went for a run. Went up to what is the point here in the top you call?
Meditation center.
Meditation. Oh, that's why some people were doing yoga there. Okay, it's a beautiful place to go. You get a nice view. The sun was getting up. That's it. We should at least make a trip there, if nothing else. Yeah. Okay. So this is, let's just stay with the root node for time being, just for purpose of illustration. and let's say epsilon is 1/4 here. Yeah, so we divided that cell into these many cells, subsets, 16 of them. Yeah, that's okay. Now comes the question about the Z order. What is my Z order? So what I can show you is the following thing. What these guys show is the following thing. That I can define 8 orderings here, which have the following property. So I can pick any ordering that could be my Z order. So what does the Z order do really there? There the Z order only specifies is that if I am at this node in the depth first search, what is the next node to visit in the depth first search? Right? That's what is the purpose of depth first search. So if I take a permutation of these subcells, that will define me one particular order in which I want to visit these cells. Is that clear to everybody? So I'm going to define you here not one particular order, but I'm going to define you 8 orders. 8 is related to the epsilon which we are working with here. And the good property about this particular ordering is the following. That if I take any 2 cells here, F and P, for example, there will be at least one order here, actually there will be exactly one, such that F and P will be neighbors in that particular order. Okay? So any 2 cells are neighbors in at least one of the 8 orders. And I will show you why this is true in the next slide. So is the statement clear? So for example, if I specify with this particular order, that means when I come to that node, I am going to visit the cell B first. Once I am done with everything with the cell B, then I am going to go to the cell C and I will do everything with the cell C in depth first search. Then I go to the cell A and so on and so on. If I am working with this particular order, I am going to visit the cell G first. Then I will visit the cell H next and so on in the depth first search. This is the meaning. Okay? Yeah.
So what is kind of the algorithm can you choose these particular 8 orders out of all the permutations?
Because it minimizes the number of these orders and it ensures that any 2 subcells will be neighbors in at least one of the orders. Okay. No more questions? You're okay, right? Oops. Sorry, it was 4. Okay, so here is the main lemma, which is what this particular paper called it as the wonderful, I can't say, Jacoba, how do you say that name? Polish name, I think, I'm not sure. Walewski's result. So what it says is, you may know this thing, that you can write a complete graph as a union of certain number of Hamiltonian parts. So a complete graph on n vertices can be partitioned into n over 2 Hamiltonian parts. So that's basically the result from 19th century. I was not able to trace the original paper, but it's referenced in some other paper, and I was not even able to trace that particular paper. And that particular paper calls it as a wonderful Walewski's construction. So here is the proof of why graph on n vertices, a complete graph on n vertices, can be written as a union of disjoint partition in terms of Hamiltonian parts. Okay? So let's say there is a graph on how many vertices are here? 8, I suppose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have a complete graph of 8 vertices here. So what you do is I'm going to break this complete graph in terms of matchings. So if I look at this particular edge, so maybe it's better to start with here. So I take this particular edge, then I take the parallel edges to this. Yeah. So they may not look very parallel here again because I was limited in terms of what we use in terms of software here. So I take these permutations for this edge. For this particular edge, I take these these in the matching, and for that edge I take this, that in the matching, and for the last one I take that in the matching, and then I join up those matching edges. So how many matchings I constructed here, and over 2, and then I joined the remaining. So if you count for the number of edges, you will see that it forms a complete graph and no edge shows up in 2 graphs.
For n equal to 3,
Yeah, so make it n equal to 4, do this construction and drop the 4 brackets. Yeah. So nice, elegant, simple. Nothing fancy about it. So we.
What I'm saying is for n equal to 3, the theorem does not seem to hold. Like
Why? N equal to 3, that means you are going to work with 4 vertices, or I will get 2 linear orders.
No, so the complete graph on 3 vertices, that's a triangle,
Yeah.
can be partitioned into 2 independent parts.
Yeah.
X partition.
Okay.
And parts, cycles.
Okay, forget that. Just take n to be even for time being. We'll deal with that part of this later.
so I think the word partition is not important. Union will have all the edges.
Union will have all the
Then
edges.
it's not partition.
Right, covering. But I wanted that each edge is only present in one of them. So what does this mean? So if I take any pair of vertex in my complete graph, then if I think of these Hamiltonian paths are my linear orders, then in one of those orders, these 2 vertices are going to be neighbors. Because the edge between those 2 guys will be present in one of these. So in that particular Hamiltonian path, those guys will be neighbors. Is that clear to everybody? Right correction. So I can define the graph on complete graph on 16 vertices. I do my 8 Hamiltonian paths. Each of these cells are representing vertices. So if I take any 2 cells, there is one particular order in which these 2 cells will be neighbors. Okay, so that's the application of that particular theorem. Clear about this? Okay. So now let's do. We perform the depth first search traversal of an epsilon quad tree. So just it has more children, so what we know a linear order which we are working with, so we can perform the depth first search traversal. So the number of children of any particular node is that particular factor, it has to do with epsilon. And we are going to consider that many linear orders. These are all calculations, so in our case we had 8 orders for 16 cells. And then for each of the depth first search traversal is going to generate us a permutation of points. Okay, it will generate us that many permutation of points. Yeah? I do not know which way I am going here. So I am at that node, which represents the whole cube here. Then that many children, I am working with this particular permutation, for example. Then you know that you're going to visit the cell A first, and then the cell, whatever is the cell written here, B, then P, then C, and so on. Okay. So now this is what is their whole construction. What they do is as follows. So this may not be very clear to everybody, but at least try to get the basic idea. So we have our point set P sitting in the unit cube. We are going to construct the shifted point sets proportional to the dimension of these point sets. For each of them, we construct the standard quad tree. And for each of the standard quad tree, we write it as union of epsilon quad trees. Okay? And now, so we start with our point set, we have the shifted point set, and each quad tree is partitioned into these things. We can work it out how many epsilon quad trees will be there for each quad tree. And then we do the linear order of these cells using this Wallace-Tees construction and whatnot. Do the depth first search traversal of the points, generates a permutation of the points. And if we work it out, this is the total number of permutations which we will get. Again, these numbers are not super important right now. Okay? So let's see why these permutations satisfy the noise condition which we need. This is what is the locality condition which we want. So this is my standard quad tree, and it has 2 points P and Q, and the cell in which they are sitting has the diameter proportional to the length between P and Q. This is what Timothy Chang currently does. Okay? So the standard quad tree, this is the cell containing P and Q. So P and Q are sitting somewhere here. And then if you look at the dimension of the cell here, the corresponding to this particular node has the diameter which is proportional to the length of P and Q. Okay? So for this node in the standard quad tree, we have our epsilon quad tree. Remember, epsilon quad tree had that label, that label, that label, that label, whatever it is. So for this node, we have the corresponding node in the epsilon quad tree, which is partitioned into subcells. Okay? So hopefully this is clear. And the way this thing is particularly set up is that, so this dimension is proportional to the length between P and Q, and each of the subcells here have a dimension which is proportional to the epsilon times some distance between P and Q. This is how we choose epsilon to guarantee this particular. So let's look at P and Q. So P is sitting in subcell, some cell here, and Q is sitting in some other cell. They can't be sitting in the same cell because the distance between P and Q is large. Okay? So now you go to the depth first search traversal and these Wallace keys business. That guarantees that this cell and this cell are neighbors in one of the linear orders. Right? This is what that assumes. So that means P is sitting here, Q is sitting in that particular subset, and now we can't read all this. But what it says, talks about now if you take the neighbor of P. Okay, so if you think about this particular cell and this particular cell, all the points in this particular cell are within this particular cell here. And the dimension of this particular cell is epsilon times the distance between P and Q. All the points in this particular cell are within this cell, here are within this cell. The distance between those points in Q is epsilon times the distance between P and Q. So now if you take P and Q, which are somewhere, I don't know whether we have a slide. Yeah, okay. So if we take all the points between P and Q here, they have the property that all those points are within this cell or that cell. In other words, they are close to P or close to Q. Okay? Is this making sense to everybody? So this is what we set out to do in our theorem, and this is what we achieved. So many standard quad trees of the shifted point set. Each quad tree is written as union of epsilon quad trees. Epsilon quad trees, the DFS traversal is given by Wallace-Keys ordering, and in these particular ordering, there is, so wherever P lines up, wherever Q lines up, we can ensure that these two cells are neighbors to each other. So P is sitting somewhere in this cell, Q is sitting somewhere in this cell. All the points between P and Q are close to P. Clear? Okay. So, we are still okay for time? Okay, 10 more minutes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Yeah, so let's see, if you understand the basic construction, let's see how it can be applied. So one of its application which actually triggered up this thing is how to compute the bichromatic nearest neighbor. So points are colored by two colors, let's say, red and blue. And we want to know, we want to find the pair, the red-blue pair, so 1 point from red, 1 point from blue, which are nearest neighbor among all red-blue pairs. Okay? So in place of doing it exactly, we want to do it approximately. Okay? The thing which I am not going to cover in this particular talk is all these constructions here can be made dynamic, which is sort of the key contribution of this particular paper. That means you can insert point, you can delete point, you can maintain these structures pretty efficiently. Okay? So the main contribution actually is in terms of the dynamic part. Okay? But we won't, we will not do that here. So let's try to sketch how to complete this approximate bichromatic nearest neighbor. Okay. So point P and point Q, let's say these are the nearest neighbors in my red-blue point set. P is from the red side, Q is from the blue side. And let's say this is the nearest neighbor. Of course, we do not know it, but it's there. Okay? Yeah. So, using all the mess which we talked about, we know that in one of the standard quadrantries, there is a cell which contains P and Q, and the diameter of this particular cell is proportional to the distance between P and Q. Right? And then we know in one of these Wallace-Keys ordering, this cell of P and cell of Q will become neighbors. Okay? So we have tried to do that. So if you think about this particular cell of P, I have made it a little bit zoomed up. So if we think about this cell and that cell, so that is a cell of Q, this is a cell of P, so this particular cell and that particular cell. Hopefully you can see that in this particular subcell, there will not be any blue point. Because if there is a blue point, that means the nearest neighbor, the nearest red blue will be much smaller than what we have assumed that it is between P and Q. Okay? And similarly, in this particular cell, there will not be any red point. So now what you do is in this particular linear order, you look at consecutive red-blue points. Okay? And you track what is the smallest distance between the consecutive red-blue points. Okay? So among all the linear orders, you look at the consecutive red-blue points, red-blue pair, and figure out what is the smallest distance. Okay? So now think about what is the distance between these 2 points. So the claim is the distance between these 2 points is proportional to the distance between these 2 cells. It should be obvious. So that means what we are going to report as our approximating, this may be point P or not, we do not know, this may be point Q or not, we do not know, but whatever we report here will have a distance which is proportional to the distance between these 2 cells, and which in turn is proportional to the distance between P and Q. Clear? So this is how you can apply it. So the formal statement with all that dynamic stuff is sitting here. I'm not going to get to that thing in this particular thing. If somebody is interested to know how to make it dynamic, I can explain it. Basically, all these linear orders are put in a balanced binary tree. You can insert, delete things fast, and you can do quite nice things, etc. There are a few more things which are required here, which I have skipped completely because of my lack of time in terms of preparation of this thing. The same idea in the linear order, we sort of look at the consecutive pair of points. Will help us to compute dynamic structures for approximate nearest neighbor, geometric spanners. I'm not going to describe what these things are. Approximate Euclidean minimum spanning trees. And in particular, what is called as a fault-tolerant geometric spanners. That's what my colleagues were trying to do. And this particular result beat them. So in the end, I would like to thank all these people and organization. So these are the 3 authors of the paper: Timothy Chen, Cyril R. Pellet, Mitchell Jones, NISER. I think this is NISER. This is from internet version of NISER. I do not know from when. And of course, Aritra. So if you have any questions, comments, you can let me know. Right, if you want to make these cubes small, subcubes smaller and bigger, you can get family of approximations. Yeah, sure.
But it's not a feature because epsilon is only integral, right? Because you're making those epsilon free.
No, so you can choose epsilon whatever you want to the power something.
But epsilon is totally the fixed and the trees, etc.
Oh, right. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Can you supply dynamically in these approximations?
So we treat as give epsilon as a part of the say present near point which is within epsilon.
Okay, that's not the case.
Yeah, that's why there is just a family, but it's not a feature.
So again, as I mentioned, the part which I skipped is about the dynamic part here. Okay, that's pretty simple and heavy because you're just maintaining balanced binary trees.